I'm Simon Grafer, this is Moto Voodoo, Dark Art of Performance. When I first got on a big capacity bike, I needed help understanding how to ride it fast. There wasn't a book or film available that really worked. I tried to learn from experienced riders I met on my travels, but either they didn't know how to put exactly what they do on circuit into words, or they didn't want to reveal their secrets. I want to save riders from the mistakes I made and the painful crashes I had whilst learning how to ride fast. I believe this film will show you the techniques that are helpful at all levels of riding, from your very first on-track experience through to racing at the highest level. Slow in, fast out. Fast riders are fast everywhere. Yes, there are certain points on the track where you must wait to get on the throttle in order to win time later, but no turns are slow in. Holding yourself back from the tank. Bollocks! Get them against the tank and off to one side. Unless you're a girl, of course. Braking softly, then hard. If the bike is not leaning over, I recommend the opposite. Once you start opening the throttle, you need to keep opening it. Unless you want a high side or run off the track, I recommend quite the opposite. Holding the throttle open to get yourself out of trouble. This may work on a dirt bike, but with close to 200 horsepower on a standard 1000cc bike with all the grip of modern tyres, holding it on is only going to make the crash bigger. Your corner entry line dictates your exit line. Think of your corner as 3 separate parts. Regardless of where you enter the turn, you can still control your mid-turn and where you exit. Using your throttle to control your suspension. Maybe in the 70s, but modern suspension is so good you can concentrate on your riding. Body position. Think of the body in 2 halves. The top half can be moved around without upsetting the bike's stability, but the bottom half does affect it, so must be moved only when necessary and at the correct moment. If you watch the best MotoGP riders closely, their lower body movements are so smooth and perfectly timed that you hardly notice them, and they do not upset the bike's stability. Also, take note of how far forward they sit. Changing your lower body position is best done when the bike is close to straight up and down and when your head is on the bike centre line. That is the moment when it's safest to move your backside in preparation for the next turn. Think about the next steps. As the bike returns to the vertical from full lean, your head moves from out to the side looking over your hand to back to the centre looking through the middle of the screen. The moment the bike is upright and your head is on the centre line, it is time to move your backside from off one side to off the other side in one smooth movement without dragging yourself across the seat, as this will upset stability at higher speeds. Then you can commit your head and your upper body to the turn as the bike leans over. You should be standing on the balls of your feet when doing this, as this is much more efficient than being flat-footed. Also, the flat-footed position restricts ground clearance. Where and when you move and position the top half of your body is less important. It's a personal style thing that you can vary to get the most from your bike setup. Don't move your lower body if the next corner goes in the same direction as the one you've just exited. Coming out of the corner and onto the straight section, don't move your backside. Leave it off to the side, ready for the next turn. Moving your backside too late in preparation for the corner. I'm talking about when a rider has almost finished braking and is about to, or already has committed to the corner, and then at the last moment they move their backside. They're moving around on the bike right when they should be concentrating on more important things, like the front tyre grip, the turn, and getting the rear back in line. Get it done much earlier when there's less to do. Moving your backside back to the centre for the straight too early. When I see a rider doing this, it makes me cringe because of the unnecessary risk. Coming out of a corner and onto a straight, get tucked in early, out of the wind. Head behind the screen. Knees and elbows tucked away. But always leave moving your backside until you're well out of the corner and the bike is closer to upright. This way there is less chance of losing rear grip, plus your mind is free to focus on riding at a risky moment. Riders sitting too far back. The importance of sitting forward. The guys that are sitting too far back, problem is it's very physical to hold yourself back there when you're on the brakes because all of your body weight's basically on your arms. So it's much more related. I can literally brake really hard like this, that way, because all your lower body's supported by the tank. You can't move once you're committed to the turn. And mid-turn, you have to be sitting forward. Turning, okay, not have to, but it makes a big difference turn of the bike, you know, but to be sitting more in the centre of the bike than back here. Secondly, if you lose the rear on the throttle and you're sitting back here, you go with it. You've got no control. Like anyone that rides a dirt bike will know that. You've got to be right forward with the front and the rear's back there doing its own thing. Doesn't matter. You're back here, you go with it, you've got less control. The other thing is, on a powerful bike, exiting the turn, hard on the throttle, if you're not right forward here, the thing wheelies. So every little bit that you're back, you have to use less throttle. The further forward you are, the more throttle you can use before it'll lift. Foot position. In general, riders should position their feet so the ball of the foot is on the peg. You not only have more ground clearance and are more agile while changing position, you also have less chance of knocking the gear lever. Selecting the wrong gear at the wrong time can cause a crash. While cornering, the ball of the foot on the inside of the corner, and therefore near the asphalt, should always be on the foot peg unless you need to change gear or use the rear brake momentarily. Outside foot. The outside foot position does not matter unless you are going to need to change direction quickly, in the middle of a chicane for example. In that case, it should be ball of the foot on the peg in preparation for change of direction. Otherwise, choose where you want it. Gear change difficulties often arise once riders begin to sit forward and off to one side for the majority of the lap. It is not necessary to have your weight on the foot peg when you change gear. You can sit off to either side and dangle your leg at this point to give yourself freedom to tap dance through the gears more easily. This is not only easier, but more accurate and faster. There is no negative to doing this. You need to move the foot back to ball-on peg position after the gear changes anyway. Convince yourself by sitting on a chair with your feet flat on the floor, applying a little weight to your feet. Now try changing gear. Your foot movement is restricted slightly. Now, dangle your legs with all your weight on your backside and try changing gear. It is easier to move, the timing is more accurate, and consequently, gear changes are faster. Braking, top half of your body. During maximum braking, I hold the top half of my body up with relatively straight arms until I commit to the corner. Apart from holding my upper body weight back for a slight centre of gravity improvement, it is far less physically demanding to hold your body in a push-up position with straight arms than bent arms. Once I really start turning in, I move my upper body off to the inside and relax my arms as I come off the brakes. Bottom half of body. To hold the bottom half of your body back during maximum braking is physically more difficult than simply letting it slide forward against the tank and off to one side in preparation for the corner. The problem with holding your lower body back from the tank during braking is not only physical, it is not safe to move your lower body forward once you commit to the corner. This is exiting turn 1 into turn 2, Motorland Aragon. It's a typical left to right change of direction, but under acceleration. What I commonly see following people on track is they'll be on the left, then exiting the turn, they'll get upright, sit in the middle, and then they've got another move, sit to the right. The rule is you're right forward, either left or right, never in the middle. The only time the rule is broken is the big long straights, so you can get tucked in and elbows out of the wind. Otherwise, left or right, never in the middle. And I say maximum forward, and this is a good example. You cannot come out of that turn one with as much throttle if you sit back at all. I even tried it for the camera today, and even leaving a small gap between me and the tank, the front just lifts, and then you can't put any input into the bars to get it to change right. So it's so important to be maximum forward, not only for the turn, mid-turn, but when you start driving, you get all your weight forward. When I say that move from left to right, what I do is when the bike's upright, I get my upper body so low that there's less chance of wheelie. Right forward, so there's less chance of wheelie. And while I'm changing direction, I put all of my, when I say change of direction, moving my body from one side to the other, I put all my weight on the balls of my feet while I'm right forward, and that alone is an anti-wheelie thing. It stops the front. So all of those things allow you to give it more throttle, more acceleration, more winning time, and more input into the bars for change of direction. And obviously when you get to the other side, then you can, when you're getting to the other side, you can put weight on the right peg to help it go down there as well. It's all three things working together: pegs, upper body weight, to get it to change direction. Important body position rules. Always sit forward against the tank, either on the left or the right, never in the middle. Only break this rule on the long straights. Only change your lower body position when you have to. Do not sit in the center during transition from one side to the other, or drag your backside across the seat. Do not move back to the center of the seat when the next corner goes in the same direction as the one you've just dealt with. Riders should try to avoid lower body position movements during hard acceleration. Prepare your lower body position before committing to the corner while the bike is relatively upright. Only change your lower body position when your bike is upright and your head is back on the center line. Stand on the balls of your feet. It's all about the straights. You can win the most amount of time safely on the straights. Corners are for getting from one straight to the next. The speed you can go around a corner is limited by grip. Your speed on the straight is not. The key to going faster is to make the straights as long as possible and the corners as short as possible, wherever you can possibly use full throttle or full braking effort. Find those areas and squeeze everything out of them you can. And I don't just mean the obvious straights, but the little ones between the corners. On a series of turns, look for the places between the corners where you can open the throttle and find the lines that allow you to make these small straights longer. Don't make the mistake of turning a short straight between two corners into an S. As with everything, there's a balance, but the general rule is that longer straights means more time on full gas and ultimately a faster lap time. If you push hard and use a lot of corner speed without being strict about your lines, you will stay leaned over for longer, so you will not be able to open the throttle fully until well out of the corner. It's not who gets on the gas first, it's who gets on full gas first. When I'm learning a track, whether I'm looking at a track diagram or out there riding, I identify the longest straight first. The exit points of the corners onto the longer straights are the most important. Everything else is of lesser importance and slightly variable. But the point where you exit your corner in order to make the longest straight as long as possible is normally fixed. You may need to sacrifice a shorter straight to position yourself best for a good exit onto a longer straight. Simon says, hold it on. Holding a big capacity bike at full throttle can be intimidating. But if you can't do it on the straights, where the least amount of risk is, where can you do it? By full throttle, I mean all the way until it's physically on the stop. Not partially open or nearly open, but wholly, completely and totally 100% open. I recommend you don't do it half-heartedly. So, once the bike is upright, I grit my teeth, grab the throttle by the scruff of the neck and hold it open until the engine RPM has climbed towards the limiter where it makes peak power in each gear, trying to blow the bastard up. This is where you are winning time. Yell abuse out loud at the bike if this works for you. Use whatever makes the fear go away, because this is the safest place to win time. After a few laps of this holding it on, the fear goes away and you can relax while the throttle is wide open and, in relative calm, line up the next corner entry while looking for your braking marker. I never use the clutch on upshifts. This doesn't damage your gearbox if your timing is correct. Once you start using full throttle together with high engine RPM, you'll start passing riders on the straights. The riders who think they're on full throttle. It is much easier and safer to pass on the straights than the corners. Throttle opening is directly proportional to lean angle. There's a lot happening when you're riding on track. If you forget everything else, do not forget this rule. It will keep you safe and show you where to push in order to go faster. I still rely on it today. The greater the lean angle, the smaller the throttle opening. The more upright the bike, the more you open that throttle. Very simple, I know, but it works. It amazes me how many reasonable track riders do not understand this and put themselves in unnecessary danger for slower lap times. Looking at the riders trying to get their knees down, I see them half throttle on the straights, looking for the corner, and then they lean the bike over and open the throttle up. Crazy. The rear tyre can cope with full throttle when the bike is relatively upright and on the fat part of the tyre. On full lean, you're using such a small contact patch. It's designed to hold you and the bike up through the middle of the corner with closed throttle, neutral throttle, or slightly building speed to adjust track position, but not hard acceleration. Look carefully at the diagram. The area from part lean left to part lean right is approximately where you can use full throttle in relative safety. Although it is impossible to say exactly what degree of lean angle is safe on your bike. It depends on the power of the bike, surface grip, and how good the rear tyre is, to name just a few variables. It is your job as a rider to solve this equation. Voodoo quick shift. If you don't have a quick shifter, the device that senses pressure on the gear lever and momentarily cuts the ignition, allowing you to change gear without backing off the throttle. You still don't need to use your whole arm when twisting the throttle. I know this might sound obvious, but I see it regularly. This causes you to lose a fair bit of time and acceleration with each gear change. Please practice what I'm about to tell you with your engine off. This is especially useful if you have a standard long action throttle. Grab the throttle with your normal hand position and open it using your wrist rather than your arm. When you run out of wrist movement, roll the throttle twist grip in your fingers while keeping your arm and elbow at roughly the same level. On the long straights, your focus should be on keeping the throttle open, only partly closing the throttle quickly and just enough to slot the next gear in. This is a scene from turn 15 down the main straight towards El Canis in the distance. It's very long, real fast. So the most important thing is, just before it, I sacrifice the exit of turn 14 to get lined up, turned before 15, get a lot of the turning done, so I can start standing up early, just after this paint, and get it as soon as possible up on a good part of the tyre and, you know, using that horsepower to get a great run down that straight. A good feeling. I really enjoy it. Like, bang it on its side, the approach to turn 15, and get the turning done from out wide, so you can go get it stood up. I think, yeah, that's the importance of having your bike turning well, so you can spend as little as time possible leant over there, out from out wide, and then standing it up And as you know, the throttle is directly connected to the lean angle of the bike. So as the bike comes up, feeding it on and holding it up there so you can get a great run down there. It's great feeling with what even the standard bikes these days with a pipe on is close to 200 horsepower, and coming out of there, wow, it's a buzz. Important rules about the straights. Find the straights and squeeze everything out of them. Make the straights longer and the corners shorter. Throttle opening is directly proportional to lean angle. Physically hold the throttle open against the stop. Don't flap your elbows. Braking. Braking markers. The first thing I do is find my braking markers at the end of the long straights. Make them at safe and early points to start with if you want, so that you know you'll stop easily. But on the straight section, the throttle needs to be open fully until you reach these markers. Brake hard immediately and see where you slow to the required speed. The aim is to reach the point where you start to turn in at the desired speed. If you slow down too early, you know you can move your braking marker a little closer to the corner on the next lap. It is very important to concentrate solely on stopping the bike in the shortest possible time, from the braking marker to the turn-in point. If you look away from the turn-in point too early, you'll probably go where you look and turn in too early. Some riders use braking markers everywhere around the track. Personally, for the shorter straights, I find I can judge the distance without a physical marker, but it's important that you do what works for you. Full brakes. Brake hard. The only thing that limits your braking when you're at safe lean angles and track conditions are good is your back wheel coming off the ground. Brake hard immediately, every time, so it becomes comfortable. By holding the throttle open fully, you will arrive at the end of the straight at a similar speed every time. By braking hard every time, you will slow to your desired speed at around the same place every lap. This leads to consistency, which in turn creates confidence. If you brake softly at first, then harder as you get closer to the corner, it can lead to panic. If you brake hard, then let off the brakes earlier, you have more control. Just like with the throttle, when the bike is upright, you must use the brakes to the maximum. Braking half-heartedly will only lose you time. Braking toward the corner. Just as with the throttle, there's an area between part lean left and part lean right where it is possible to use maximum braking with no danger. And again, you can keep the bike in this zone longer by leaning your upper body off the side of the bike. This enables you to start committing to the corner and keep the bike more upright for a moment longer. I call this stealing a few meters. If you steal these few meters on the corner entries and also the corner exits, you'll have made the straights longer and will ultimately win a good amount of time over the whole lap. Toward the end of the maximum braking period, approaching almost every corner, I brake at a slight angle lean and line toward the corner. This not only gets you closer to the corner from the outside of the track, so the distance to the apex once you release the brake is shorter, it also puts your bike on the right trajectory, thus making the turn easier. It also makes it possible to release the brake at a higher speed if the corner requires it. Basically, this method of braking towards the corner is setting yourself up for corner entry. When you start to lean the bike on full brakes, you will get to a certain point when you may feel the bike start to resist or refuse to lean. Your bike and front tyre are telling you something. Do not ignore this warning and stay on full brakes beyond this lean angle. Full braking at small lean angles is not to be confused with trail braking. Trail braking is braking more gently but at greater lean angle and is far more risky. Occasionally I've come across corners where I'm leaning and still accelerating as I get to the point where I must start braking. In this situation, it is vital that you roll off the throttle a fraction before applying the brakes in order to transfer weight to the front tyre. Otherwise, there's a good chance of locking the front wheel because there's no weight on it. On the initial hard braking, hold the top half of your body back with relatively straight arms because this uses less energy, as I mentioned earlier. Let the bottom half of your body slide forward against the tank and off to the side appropriate for the corner you're approaching. Using the fuel tank to support the bottom half of your body saves a lot of energy. All this is scary and difficult to make yourself do at first, but our minds adjust quickly and it's good to get into the habit of braking hard every time. Like most things we do repeatedly, in a short time it will become second nature to brake like a demon and be relatively relaxed at the same time. If the rear wheel starts coming around during hard braking, sliding out to the side, chattering, bouncing, all you need to do is put a slight pressure on the clutch lever, enough to make the clutch slip ever so slightly, which results in the rear coming back into line and the chatter stopping. This is what slipper clutches do automatically. For this and down changing, I enter every corner with one finger on the clutch. It does not matter if all this happens when you are braking, as long as you get it back into line and under control before you release the brakes and commit to the corner. This rear wheel stepping out and backing in is the easiest type of slide to do and control. If you brake hard enough at a slight lean angle and change down through the gears, the rear will automatically step out. The danger really only comes from not getting the rear back into line before you release the front or both brakes. On a bike with lower grip, like those used in other motorcycle racing disciplines, enduro, supermoto, etc., it is possible to transition from backing in on the brakes to quickly coming off the brakes and onto the throttle while the rear is still stepped out in order to continue the slide. On a sports bike with a good rear tyre, this is incredibly dangerous. I never do it. You might get away with it a few times, but eventually it'll bite you big style. Changing down. As soon as you hit the brakes, you should be going down through the gearbox to the gear that is correct for that corner. It is not important to know what gear you're in, as long as it is the correct gear for the corner. You know this by the engine RPM. Personally, for each corner I go into, I note how many gears I go down to get the right gear, not what gear I'm in. So for example, down 1 or down 3, but you soon know if you are wrong, because either the bike is not slowing enough and the engine RPM is low, or it's backing in and revving its bollocks off. While the bike is relatively upright during hard braking, it is not a problem to change to the correct gear, as long as this is done before you release the brakes and commit to the corner. I use one finger on the clutch and blip the throttle to smoothly match the down changes. Ever had a false neutral? The bike doesn't want to stop and wants to go straight on, pushing the front tyre ahead of it. The same is true in reverse. If you go down the gears and keep the engine braking at its maximum, so high engine RPM, the bike stops better, turns better, and accelerates off the corner better. These are all extra little ways you can make time over someone who can't be bothered with extra gear changes. By using this technique, you can enter the corner much faster than you ever thought possible. This is not an easy thing to do, something that you build up to. Once you have it mastered, it is an incredibly useful skill for almost every corner of every track. I never use the rear brake on a 4-stroke. I use engine braking, but this is a personal choice. When I rode 500 2-strokes in GPs, I had to learn to use the rear brake again because they have no engine braking. In order not to have to move my foot on right corners and for ground clearance, I chose to remove the foot-operated brake and fit a thumb-operated rear brake, which meant my hands were working the throttle, clutch, front and rear brakes all at the same time. Neither the rear brake or the engine braking is very efficient at stopping the bike in a straight line. They really come into effect once you lean over and there's some weight back on the rear tyre. I choose engine brake over rear brake on a 4-stroke because you have to think about and control the rear brake. You don't have to control engine braking. The motor does it for you if you choose the right gears. The rear wheel's tendency to come around during maximum braking at part lean, backing in, is one of the reasons you see top riders weight shifting by holding their leg out. As soon as you turn the bike toward the corner under heavy braking, The front of the bike moves slightly in the direction of the corner, but the inertia of everything else behind it wants to continue straight ahead. This results in the weight of the bike and the rider behind the front tyre contact patch no longer being evenly distributed. At this same moment, the rear wheel has almost no downward force on it, and the engine braking or rear brake is resisting the asphalt's attempt to turn it. So the rear wheel wants to slide out. This is called backing in. Taking your inside foot off the peg and moving your whole leg towards the inside of the corner redistributes the weight of you and the bike behind the front tyre contact patch more evenly again. So this helps prevent the rear wheel from backing in. I've also noticed that taking my foot off the footrest and moving it close to the asphalt surface and also rearward allows me to brake slightly harder before the rear wheel lifts off the surface. This enables me to stop the bike a metre or two earlier and not run wide, but can also help avoid a collision with the bike in front. I call this my panic brake. Suspension. To make hard braking safe and to get the most out of your bike and yourself, you'll need well set up front suspension. If your forks have springs that are too soft or too soft damping settings, or both, they will dive through their stroke too quickly, transferring all of the weight of the bike and the rider to the front tyre contact patch. If this is the case, your bike will not only be hard to stop, there is a good chance the front tyre will lose grip once you start turning into the corner because of this load. Well set up suspension will slow this weight transfer and allow you to focus on your riding. Obviously, good brakes are a must. Rules of braking. Find your braking markers. Concentrate on stopping the bike in the shortest possible time. Always brake hard. Brake on a slight angle toward the corner if required. Change down through the gears to maximize the engine braking. Get the bike settled and ensure the back is in line before releasing the front brake and turning into the corner. Can you use your upper body to keep the bike in the maximum braking zone to steal a few meters? Corner entry. When approaching a corner on full brakes, once I arrive at the part lean angle where the bike starts to resist leaning more, in order to stay on full brakes longer, I start to lean my upper body into the corner instead of leaning the bike. I extend my arms and lean my upper body off the side of the bike, so the bike can remain at the same lean angle for a few moments longer. Essentially, this is stealing a few more meters closer to the corner on full brakes while committing to the turn. When you decide the time is right, simultaneously release the front brake and fully commit your upper body and bike to the corner. The nature of the corner will dictate whether you need to make this transition gently and slowly or more decisively and quickly. Your braking effort must be directly related to the lean angle of your bike. You can stay on full brakes until a certain lean angle, just like with a throttle. Your aim is to keep the load on the front tyre consistent all the way through the transition from upright to full lean, balancing the forces on the tyres from braking to cornering. The more you lean with the brakes applied, the bigger the risk of the front letting go. There is absolutely no point taking risks by pushing in this area until you are executing all other areas of riding well. Let me explain this another way. Imagine you are compressing the front fork by a certain amount when you're at maximum braking in a straight line. Once you start turning in, your aim is to keep the forks compressed by the same amount. To do this, reduce brake pressure as you lean over and the lateral forces due to cornering increase. Once I reach the point where I do not want to push my luck any further, I smoothly and simultaneously release the front brake completely, commit to my maximum lean with the bike and my upper body while relaxing those stiff arms that supported me under heavy braking. All of this is to give the front tyre the best chance of maximum turn without losing grip. Turning on a closed throttle. I close the throttle on the entry of almost every corner of every track. To go fast, you must take advantage of not only the rear grip you have, but also the front. If you have the right tyres and they're warm, you can trust them. Until you're riding at a very high level, it's mainly throttle opening and applying the brakes that make the tyres let go, not closing the throttle. I use maximum engine braking, full lean angle, closed throttle, and no brakes simultaneously. You'll never feel the bike turn better than at this moment. It is a fantastic technique that I trust, but it only works to its optimum if you've changed down through the gears beforehand under heavy braking. So you have the maximum amount of engine braking and have released the brakes while you still have enough speed to reach mid-turn. Just a warning, you'll need a clear track in front of you to practice this in case you come across a late turn-in rider who stays on the brakes until he's almost stopped. This might sound scary, and most riders prefer to keep dragging that front brake for too long, scrubbing off too much speed, as if every corner is a hairpin. Consider the following. Closed throttle turning is much safer than trail braking, because with no front brake applied, there is much less chance of the front tyre letting go. If it does, it happens at a slower rate, and you have much more chance of it coming back because the wheel's turning freely. This technique is more effective in flowing corners rather than hairpin turns where you need to scrub off more speed by staying on the front brake a little longer. As a general guide, if you have to open the throttle to get to the apex, you've gone in too slow or you've stayed on the brakes too long. If you've stayed on the brakes too long, when you let them go and are on full lean, you'll not be carrying enough speed to enter the corner with a closed throttle. As soon as you open the throttle, you take away the optimum turn of your bike and you put more stress on your rear tyre. Please don't try to make up for it by accelerating and destroying your turn and exit as well. You can vary your line by using small amounts of throttle to adjust where you are on track, but do not accelerate. Keep strictly to the correct line and get the exit right. Fix the entry on the next lap by getting off the brakes fractionally earlier so you carry a little more speed. Chip away at it like this, bit by bit, until when you release the brakes you no longer need to open the throttle to get to the corner. This is not easy and it will take some time. You will be impressed with the way your bike turns, the grip of your front tyre, and how fast you can enter the turn using this tool. Another tip, once you let go of the brakes, you should go to your maximum lean as quickly as possible so the bike can turn in the tightest arc possible. If you lean the bike slowly, it is like turning the steering wheel of your car slowly. Its turning circle won't be as small as it could be. If you don't use all of the lean angle available while you're off the brakes and have the throttle closed, you will not turn as tightly as you could. Corner entry lines. It is important to prepare for the entry of the corner while you're still on the throttle approaching the corner. Sometimes you'll have to compromise the exit and acceleration out of one corner or on a straight to get into the correct position for the next corner. If you don't, it's often not only the entry of the corner that suffers, but mid-turn. Too late in preparation for the next corner, your bike will be aiming in one direction when the corner goes in the other direction. This asks too much of the front tyre and puts you in a risky situation. Advanced. On double apex corners, it's an advantage to enter even hotter but still on a closed throttle. Go in so fast that you run out to mid-track or wider, depending on what works for that particular turn, before the bike has slowed enough to start turning back toward the inside. It takes balls to run it in that hot, but when the bike starts turning back, it comes back on a better line for the exit. You will have gained time on the entry, lost a little time by running wide in the middle, then gained time out of the turn and all the way down the next straight. Overall, you've smoked the guy who just rode around the turn. Corner Entry General Guide. Rider A. By braking in a straight line for too long, Rider A will have a much later turn-in point. This makes the initial turn-in sharper, putting stress on the tyres for no gain. It also results in having to slow down too much to get to the corner. So Rider A will not be able to use turning on a closed throttle, and will have to get back on the throttle to get to the corner. And opening the throttle takes away the optimum turning circle of the bike. So rider A does not utilize the available side grip of the front tyre while braking at a slight angle or turning on a closed throttle. Rider A will easily be overtaken by rider B on entry. Rider A makes the corner much longer than it needs to be by spending longer on full lean. Remember, the straight's longer, corner's shorter rule. Rider B. Starting from the outside of the track, rider B brakes in a straight line, then when the time is right, brakes at a slight angle and lean toward the corner. Rider B can brake just as hard using this line as rider A can in a straight line. Even though total maximum braking distance is the same for both riders, rider B can brake slightly later because he has moved his brake release point and turn-in point closer to the corner. Also, rider B doesn't have to slow as much, can release the brake at a higher speed and still make the apex, turning with a closed throttle, because the bike is on a better angle for the corner. The distance from the brake release point to the centre of the corner is far shorter, so takes less time. Finally, the corner is shorter and there is less time on full lean, so less risk. Remember the straight's longer, corner shorter rule. Optimum turn-in point. The aim is to keep a constant level of pressure close to the limit on the tyres all the way into and through a turn. You do not want a higher stress level at one particular point. Imagine a fast 90-degree turn that requires you to close the throttle but not to brake. If you turn in too early, you make the corner tighter in the middle, therefore loading up the front tyre more than necessary at that point. If you turn in too late, you stress the tyres on the initial turn-in. The optimum turn-in point is between those two extremes, putting the same load on the tyres all the way into and through the turn. If there isn't a high stress point, there is no one particular area the tyre will let go. The transition from upright on full throttle to full lean and closed throttle has to be smooth and progressive. The corner will dictate if this transition must happen quickly or slowly. The throttle position, the lean angle and the turn all work together to keep the pressure on the tyres even. Remember, the throttle position is directly connected to the lean angle of the bike. Turn 8, it's basically turn 8 and 9 is the corkscrew. It's like a chicane I suppose, but it's quite steep downhill. Thing here I do is I'm going along the short straight, as we were saying in the car, absolutely pinned first, second, that's standard gearing, and when I get to the 100-metre board I'm on the brakes, trying to get that speed off as soon as possible. I banged it first, which as you see helps, like backs it in a little bit, helps it slow down, and stops the front pushing in the middle when I can let go of the brake, and it helps it slow down. So if I'm in second, I tried it in second and it just rushes through way too fast and you can't stop on the second part, you know, it's hard to get it turned. So I'm not saying first or second on your bike will be right, but with that gear, you've got to get in a low gear again to be able to run in there really quickly. So what I do, brake, try and concentrate getting the speed off, brake really hard, then as I turn in, I steal a little bit more brake by holding the bike up as I'm the last approach, then I let go the brake, going a little bit too quick with enough speed to rush through, maybe a little squirt in the centre as it comes up, and I swap sides, and then as you see down here it drops off, but I don't pull it too far to the right, a little, but I want to make it as fast and straight a run through as possible, a little pull back to make the exit basically. But that first gear again helps it turn by itself, and you drop off down the hill with relatively low push or pressure on the front. It helps it pull around, and then I'm careful because it's off camber, get the bike up and go out of there down the next section. But it is fun, this is great. It's kind of, you're letting the bike do its job, and then you try and get off the brake and go body over the paint, both sides, and let it run through there. You know, I think that's a much safer way to do a chicane than trying to brake or accelerate through one, which I've hurt myself a few times trying to do that. The rules of corner entry. Line up corner entry while you're still on the throttle. Maximize full braking while in the safe lean angle area before the corner. Can you steal a few extra meters? Find the optimum turn-in point. Release the brakes while carrying enough speed to get to the corner without using the throttle. Release the brakes and get to your full lean angle in one smooth movement. Once you release the brakes, relax your arms and don't disturb the bike and tyres doing their work. For corner entry that doesn't require braking, make the transition between upright on full throttle to full lean and closed throttle smooth and progressive. Mid-corner. Once your bike is fully on its side, maximum lean, relax your arms and your grip on the bars. This not only saves you energy and avoids arm pump, it also feeds less input into the bike. This means the bike is more stable and lets the tyre and chassis geometry do their work. The less input you put into the bars, the smaller chance of the front tyre letting go. If your bike needs input into the bars at this point to steer or to stay leaned over, then something is not quite right. This could be caused by setup or tyres. Street-orientated tyres can cause this as they have a flatter profile for more stability. The next very important skill has proved difficult to teach. Some people just do it, others don't seem to understand. Once you've decided the time is right to crack open the throttle, you need to do so softly and so slightly that the bike stops decelerating but stays strictly on the line you have chosen at the correct speed. Fast, but not running offline. If you open the throttle too much or too early, the bike will run wide and off the line you need, destroying your turn and your exit. Also, it is dangerous, especially now the RPM is very high because you're utilizing maximum engine braking on entry, and there is limited rear grip when you're traveling as fast as possible at full lean. You may feel the rear moving around at this point. It is important not to try and go faster here, but to keep a neutral throttle, so not accelerating hard or decelerating, and wait for the bike to turn. The skill is in knowing when to crack the throttle open, not too much, not too early, and not too late. I only crack the throttle when I know I'm going to make it back to the paint on the inside of the corner and I've slowed enough. Once you have it cracked, wait. Keep the bike on that neutral throttle, still turning at its maximum, hugging the tight inside line a moment longer, until you can stand the bike up off the edge of that rear tyre, get on the throttle harder, winning time accelerating off the corner. If you crack it open too hard or too early, you'll stay leaned over for longer and never get accelerating hard until it's too late, and you risk high-siding. Like I always say, it's not who's first on the gas, it's who's first on full gas. Knee down. One of the questions I'm asked regularly is, knee down. How much, how hard, when and when not to? Getting your knee down is not important for your lap time. It's just a personal thing. I use it like a gauge and a safety net. Gauge. If your knee is on the ground, you know how far you're leaned over. I don't use it heavily, I use it softly, just touching everywhere. I don't need to change my knee sliders very often. Some riders have smoke coming off theirs and change them regularly. It is, once again, a personal choice. Safety net. The only time having my knee on the ground really does help is if I lose the front. Then I drive my knee into the ground as hard as possible, trying to hold the bike up long enough for the front tyre to gain grip and pop back up. If you're on the front brake when the front goes, there's not much chance of saving it. If you're not, there's a good chance it'll come back. Holding your bike up on your knee is not something you plan. It's a reaction, a reflex, just like when you slip and try to stay upright. I've never hurt myself pushing my knee into the track when the front goes, but you do have to watch for high curbs. People have mentioned that they need to sit back from the tank in order to put their knee out further and not pivot around the tank. I don't rate knee down as important. It will come when you go fast. Concentrate on going fast, which requires sitting forward. Look at the styles of Doohan, Schwantz, Bayliss and myself for example. It is clear to see that we all sit forward and pivot around the tank. I'm not saying that this is the only way, just that there's nothing wrong with it. People that hang off the bike and push their knee out as far as possible to touch the ground are just stopping the bike from leaning over further. The bike will never be able to turn to its optimum if held up like this in the mid-turn. The only other reason I've heard for getting your knee down is to stick it in the dirt on the inside of the corner, spraying the rider behind with stones. One of my heroes and friend, Mick Doohan, told me about this and then did it to me a few years later in the Dutch 500 Grand Prix. I was hiding behind the screen laughing out loud. Personally, I would not recommend doing this, as your knee could catch in the dirt and rip you off the bike, but all's fair in love and racing. The last turn is, I think, the corner you can make the most amount of time on. It is, for want of a better word, ballsy. Going in at the end of that really long back straight. How I try and do it is go fast in, wait, run wide because you've gone so fast in, and fast out, get a good run out. So basically make it a double apex instead of running around the inside. It goes back to the rule I was saying earlier about longer straights, shorter corners. If you make the turn in late, and make the corner like this and try and rush across and then go right to the outside, you've made it like that. I make it more like this, So you rush on the way in, it makes that straight longer. You can go in full brakes for longer, brake 50 metres later than you could if you brake straight, and let go, don't go too quick, let it run out, and then it gives you the massive advantage of a really good drive on the way out because you're coming from out wider. Rules for mid-corner. Choose the correct moment and speed to crack the throttle open. Open the throttle extremely softly and smoothly, and only enough to stop deceleration. Wait! Too hard on the gas, too early, is dangerous and usually slower. Corner exit. The point where you need to be in control, have finished turning, and on the way up off the edge of the rear tyre, late in the corner and lining up the exit, is right next to the paint on the inside of the corner. You need to do this in order to achieve optimum exit and make the straights as long as possible. Your body should be over the paint. Many riders think because their knee is close to the paint on the inside of the corner that they are in the right position. It is where your tyres are that is important. They have to be close to the paint on the inside, which means your body is well over the paint. When a bike turns well in the mid-turn, it's a pleasure to ride and it makes the exit easier and safer. If you can't get your bike to turn well, you'll still be at your maximum lean angle waiting for the bike to turn when you reach your exit point. Accelerating at too big a lean angle is dangerous. Also, waiting for the bike to turn after the optimum exit point costs you time. Your bike setup, geometry, ride height, preload, springs is important here. Also, tyres and the tyre profiles can make a big difference to how efficiently your bike turns and can make the rider's work easier and safer when it comes to exiting the turn. On the most important exits, the ones onto the long straights, most of the turning is done before I get to the late apex, so I can start to pick up the bike and drive as I clip the paint on the inside at the start of the exit. This way, you sacrifice a little speed and time before the late apex to allow you to drive from the apex all the way out of the turn and down that long straight. Straights longer, corners shorter. When you've lined up the exit and start to stand the bike up, as the bike lifts up off full lean, you start applying the throttle. Remember, throttle opening is directly related to the lean angle of the bike. This is the moment you can steal a few meters by extending your arms and pushing the bike up and away from your body. The bike is in a more upright position earlier, which means you can instantly apply more throttle. This is only possible if you wait a fraction longer. As I explained earlier, If you don't get the bike turned enough in the mid-turn, you won't be able to steal a few meters on the exit. If you stand the bike up before it is turned enough, it'll just run wide, or maybe even off the track. Deciding how much throttle to use as you lift the bike up involves treading a very fine line. Because you've gone down gears to use engine braking and turning with a closed throttle, the engine will be at relatively high RPM in the mid-turn, producing high power. The peak power of your engine is on tap, ready to go in an instant. It is therefore imperative to keep it on a smooth, constant or neutral throttle until you can pick the bike up from full lean and off the edge of the rear tyre. Then you can really hold it on. That moment when you have the throttle against the stop in a low gear with the bike accelerating hard out of the turn, your backside still off the side of the seat at part lean, but upright enough to be in the safe area of the rear tyre, is when you are winning time. You want as much of this in a lap as possible. If you find yourself waiting for the engine to pick up RPM and accelerate harder, you are losing time. Whenever you are ready to pick the bike up and accelerate, the bike must jump forward as hard as possible, winning as much time as possible. The engine will help you do this, but only if it is in the last few thousand RPM of its range. Finding the right exit gear. If you're in too high a gear, the bike won't respond to the throttle instantaneously, so there will be a delay in it making peak horsepower and accelerating hard. If it is in too low a gear, you won't get far enough out of the corner and will still be leaned over when you hit the rev limiter. The perfect gear is the one that allows you to accelerate hard, far enough out of the turn without any delay until the bike is at a safer lean angle before you need to hook the next gear. Wheelie Control by YZR 500 was extremely difficult. I found it almost impossible to stop it wheeling out of the corners when I first rode it. When it wheelied, I had to shut the throttle and other riders would come past. It taught me to hold myself as far forward and as low as possible, but also how effective it is to transfer the majority of your weight to your foot pegs through the balls of your feet. No, you're not standing up. It looks like you're still sitting, but you're putting minimal weight on the seat. This instantly raises the level of acceleration you can get away with without the front wheel heading skyward. Looking at a bike side on, you'll see that if you have your weight on your backside, it is further back and higher than if you have it on the foot pegs. Recently, while instructing on circuit, I was reminded of how effective this is anywhere you have a wheelie under acceleration problem. I call it like two different personalities, Jekyll and Hyde. When I'm upright, I'm Mr. Aggressive. Just blow the bastard up, give it everything, squeeze every last ounce of acceleration. Right forward in the last couple of thousand RPM. Then, as soon as it starts leaning over, like for example, turn 1 to 2, you're upright, and I go back to Mr. Gentleman, just let it rush through there, don't do anything to upset the tyres, and let it do its job, you know, let the tyres and the turn of the bike do its job until you transform as it comes up back into Mr. Aggressive, squeeze everything out of that. I think of it as like, when it's upright, something really aggressive, you know, rage against the machine, and then when it's on its side, it's like birds tweeting, it's silent, you know, there's no engine noise, it's just a little bit of wind noise, and then... Rules for corner exit. The throttle is directly connected to the lean angle of the bike. Do not try and accelerate hard before you get up off the edge of the rear tyre. The rider's body should be well over the paint and the tyres close to it. The bike must be in a low enough gear and at high enough RPM for the engine to produce high power and hard acceleration instantaneously. Control wheelies by positioning your body as far forward and as low as possible, and if necessary, transfer your body weight to the balls of your feet. Try to steal a few meters. Voodoo tricks. full wet tyres, they're unbelievable. For those of you who haven't ridden on them, once you try them, you'll never want to ride on normal treaded tyres again. They're so much better. I'm guessing 5-10 times better than normal ones. The other thing is there's so much more feel, like with because the rubber's so much softer, the grip's so much better, but when they do let go, they give you a bit of feel rather than the hard feel of a standard road tyre that just you think it's all right, and much earlier but also much faster they let go and you're on your ear before you know it. These things keep you safe and so much fun. Really good.
Low grip areas. The general rule about low grip due to surface, adverse camber, bumps, etc. is that it's better to carry speed across these areas while leaning rather than accelerate or brake across them. Paddock Hill Bend at Brands Hatch and the corkscrews at both Laguna Seca and Motorland Aragon are examples of such sections. Rather than brake or accelerate in them, I try to carry speed through these corners. Chicanes. In slow and medium speed chicanes, I brake at an angle on the approach to help find a straight line through the chicane from paint to paint. Like every corner, I make sure I release the brake before I get too much lean angle and then have enough speed to travel through the chicane without having to accelerate before the exit. Once off the brakes, I really go to work getting my body over the paint on the inside of the first part of the chicane and then back over the other side of the bike for the second part. I try to do this in a fast, flowing, single movement. All this is much safer without brakes and throttle that are likely to make the tyres let go. There are three main elements to getting your bike to change direction. Pressure on the bars, countersteering. I think there is too much importance put on countersteering to change direction. For example, when I pushed my children off on their bicycles for the very first time at about 4 years old, they changed direction by countersteering without me having to tell them about it. We all do it naturally. I hope so for your sake. And the only thing that needs to be thought about is timing and the force required. As I explained in corner entry, it is important to keep the transitional forces smooth and not to create a stress point for your tyres. This is where people who put too much emphasis on countersteering can come unstuck by using it too aggressively and at the wrong moment. When you decide the time is right, you simultaneously pull on the outside bar and push on the inside bar. If you are braking at the time of change of direction, you can apply much more force to the bars because the tyre has more weight on it, allowing you to get the change of direction done faster. Also, during braking, you'll already have pressure on both bars, so you will just need to apply more to the inside bar and give the outside bar a pull only if necessary. This is why your triceps get a good workout riding on circuit. Once I have done this and initiated the change of direction, I commit my upper body to the corner and look where I want to go. Pressure on the foot pegs. If I am braking, I personally don't find it necessary to apply weight to the foot pegs to get the change of direction done, as the front tyre has enough grip to cope with the change of direction, and the majority of my body weight wants to go forward at that moment, not down. I'm being supported by the tank and the handlebars, and I don't have much weight to spare to push on the pegs. On the other hand, if you're accelerating during change of direction, it's a whole different beast. One of my riding heroes, Mick Doohan, is a classic example of this. Grip the bars, hold yourself forward, facing the screen, chest on the tank, backside hovering over the seat with all your weight on the foot pegs. Your front tyre will have very little weight on it, so you can use very little force on the bars before it will turn and skim the ground. This is very bad for stability. So you need to use the foot pegs to the full to make up for the lack of force you can put through the bars. Under hard acceleration, if your weight is off the seat, the centre of gravity of you and your bike moves down and forward, enabling you to open the throttle more before the front tyre lifts. When not braking and applying pressure to the bars to get the bike to change direction, I am also pushing on the inside foot peg. The only way to apply pressure to a single foot peg
is to commit your body to that side. It is not a conscious, forceful move. It is a fluid action that coincides with pulling your weight forward, moving your body position to that side, and applying pressure to the bars, all in a balanced way. This is all about getting the timing right to maintain the stability of the bike, body position, and weight distribution. I use this for every corner. It is basically looking through the corner to where you want to go and moving your head and body off the side of the bike in that direction by extending your arms. Try this. If you're sitting in a chair right now, pretend to hold the bike's bars in your hands. They should be close to your body because you're holding yourself forward and accelerating with the throttle open. Now lean forward and off to the left, putting weight on your left foot at the same time as turning the bars to the right. This is basically what I mean. Slowing down on the straight causes you to have a big speed difference with riders who don't. Please do not put yourself in this situation. It is better to continue at a reasonably fast pace until the time you need to signal early that you are coming into the pit lane. Even if I'm riding with 1 foot off the foot peg, I still continue at a reasonably quick pace so not to put myself in more danger than necessary. Exiting pit lane, it doesn't matter what track I'm at, I make sure I get up to speed quickly to reduce that speed difference, which I think is the most dangerous thing. And I stay completely, on this track anyway, to the left, not crossing across the racing line at all. I stay right, I literally go up on, you'll hear, up on that ripple strip, on the paint, riding along in a straight line to stay out of anyone's way. And I do take a wide line around turn 3, stay wide, and then I haven't been in anyone's way for sure, and I take a look, see if anyone's coming. I'm already up to speed. Now you can join the race line, you know. It makes it safer. And I think it's pretty much every track you can treat with the same approach, you know. Don't cross the race line till you're up to speed. Falk seals. If they're leaking a little bit on the street, they're most likely going to leak a lot more when you're riding on the circuit because braking's much more aggressive. And also, if they're worn, the front forks are worn, saggy, soft, you can't brake as hard and aggressive because they dive through the stroke too fast and don't give you confidence. Most of the confidence you feel on track comes through the front end, you know. So I'm not saying you need the best forks, just well-maintained, recently serviced and set up. If you are going to give your forks to someone to work on, please don't give it to any old monkey. Give it to a qualified technician, you know, to make sure they're right. Brake lines. Incorrectly routed brake lines can cause brake failure. I've seen it, really scary. Speaking of correctly routed, throttle cable. Make sure the free play is correct, not too much, not too little, and that the cables are correctly routed, so when you're going lock to lock, they don't rev the engine or, you know, cause any hazard that way. Brake lever. On race bikes, you get a bit more adjustment, you know, you got more room to adjust the lever clamp up and down the bar, and you can make the brakes feel like they've got a lot more power by moving it up, and you get twice the leverage. Brakes feel awesome. A too tightly tensioned chain is just as bad, if not worse, than too loose chain. And Mick's going to show us the two different extremes. Serious tight. Please make sure it's pretty much bang on what the manufacturer recommends in the handbook, you know, the motorcycle manufacturer. And Mick's going to show us what's bang on. Hang on. Next thing is, Mick's going to check our tyre pressures. It's extremely important. Find out what the tyre manufacturer recommends for your model of tyre and check it every time before you ride, because if they're not correct, they'll not only grip less, you know, whether they're too high or too low, they'll wear out faster. It's like throwing money away. the manufacturer often give a pressure, hot or cold, you know, because when they're used on track they get hotter, or with a warmer they're hotter, and the pressure rises if it's air, because heat makes air expand and get a higher pressure. But so they'll give a hot or a cold temperature to check them out. Like I said, grip level will be higher if the pressure's correct, and life of the tyre. For example, if it's too hard, too much pressure, you have a smaller contact patch on the, you know, less tyres touching the road, less grip, and it gives that little bit a harder time. I think the right choice of tyres for riding on track is probably the most important thing, because I have guys coming to me and saying, "Si, I don't think I'm fast enough to need track-specific tyres, race tyres," and the way I see it, racers, their aim is to keep pushing the tyre level, grip level, as close to the limit as possible, and that's what they're good at, you know, just going all the way around the lap, get right near the limit without going over it. Guys with less experience, girls with less experience are going like this. One corner they'll be, oh, and next minute they're nowhere near the limit, and the next minute they're over. If you can buy the right tyre to ride on track, put that limit up here, you're safe, you know. You spend the whole day up and down, but don't go over. That's the way I see it. Street tyres, they're made to work cold, you know, for going riding to the shop. And when they get to the temperature that we get them on track, they don't work as good, you know, they're basically melting. So yeah, they'll be a little bit safer on those first couple of laps if they're cold, but they'll never get to the same grip level as track-specific tyres. Another thing is temperature, like I mentioned before. Track-specific tyres don't work as well cold. Some of them are lethal cold, so you've got to really take your time and get them warm. What I do is, I don't do that swerving. Personally, I think it went out in the 90s. It's time on the side that gets heat in your tyres. So basically, when it's upright, I go, you know, down those straights, use plenty of throttle, get some heat and make those tyres work. Same on the brakes. In a straight line, I get some heat into them. As soon as you've got to lean it all, I get off brakes and throttle and let it roll, nice and gentle. Don't use the gas or brakes and upset those cold tyres. Let it roll, spend time on the side gradually, take about 2 laps and being gentle, and you've got heat in and away you can go. And rather than waste that 2 laps, 3 laps every session at the beginning and risking your body on cold tyres, I prefer to have a set of stands, tyre warmers. They're like electric blankets for your tyres, and they're thermostatically controlled, and keep the tyres, while you're mucking around waiting for your session, keep your tyres at the right temperature so you can just roll out the garage, go and straight on it.
Pit lane. Pit lane itself can be just as dangerous as the track. Try to think of pit lane as a road with 2 sides. The pit wall side will have bikes travelling up to 40 miles an hour or 60 kilometres an hour. Do not stop on the pit wall side of pit lane to talk to your buddies up on pit wall. Think of this side as a main road with plenty of traffic. Look carefully for bikes and people before pulling out, and please look very carefully before stepping onto it from pit wall or the garage side. It is very easy to forget and step off pit wall straight in front of a speeding bike. Please make sure that any friends and family with you understand these dangers. Also, do not speed on the pit lane garage side of pit lane. Think of this as riding on the hard shoulder. There is a much greater chance of someone pulling out or stepping out in front of you. Be patient and polite in the pit lane. The really fast guys save speeding, noise and turning heads for out on the circuit. Only uncool guys feel the need to do this in their garage or pit lane, making other garage or pit lane users' day slightly more unpleasant. There are many things you'll need to take to the circuit that are both essential and useful. Please see the Moto Voodoo book for a full list and explanation of all these items.
Like the boots, gloves, nice and thin, cut short inside here so they don't bunch up when you're grabbing something, like the throttle, and you have much more feel and control of the throttle and the brake with them compared to big, thick winter gloves or, you know, basically gloves not made for this job. My lid is basically the Union Jack going into 4 stars for New Zealand. That's it. That's why the English like it, because it looks like the English flag, but it's not really. In general, the more you pay for a helmet, the better quality you get. I skimp on some things, but not helmets. I would never put a cheapie on my head. My honest opinion, lids, when you look at it on the shelf, how can you tell if it's protective? So that's why I say just buy one of the good companies. Okay, helmet position. When you're on the street, it feels comfy to have them sitting low on your head, you know, there's no problem. But on a racetrack, because you're like this, if you have them sitting low on your head, you have to bend your neck a lot to see where you're going, and after a while, I mean, all your signals from there to the rest of your body go through here. So you're like, oh, it's no good. Better off sliding the helmet up here and using your eyes to see, like this, look. Instead of here and having to go like here, so you're looking more through the centre of your vision, and you can use your eyes as much as your neck, you know, or more. When I first had a go at road racing from motocross, I wore some motocross boots, thinking, oh, I've got more protection, but they're so big, you've got no ground clearance, and secondly, you've got no feel. These dainty little things like right up out of the way, but also you've got more feel on the pegs and change gear, better brake, and feel what's going on. Smaller road boots, no problem, but if you're wearing the big chunky work style things, no, you're going to have less ground clearance because they're big and less feel. Most track day companies allow you to ride on circuit with either a one-piece suit or a zip-together one, you know, to protect you if you fall down, but personally I prefer one piece.